So let me check if it's on.
So the link is here.
I think you can even just copy it off of YouTube.
Can just
Yeah. Okay. And put it in your WhatsApp.
That's the link.
Yeah, it should be the one.
Nazogera makusini. Agaba no kaliwa.
Is this the browser you are in?
Must be.
Well, no, it should be a YouTube channel.
One of these.
Let's check. Let's check. Sorry, what's the page called? I want to check here if I can see that. Let's try this, the YouTube one.
Yeah, this one.
That's yours.
That's the link. This one another one.
I want.
No, can say yeah, you repeat.
Can you hear pink? It's the one I was using.
Is that I think we might have been using a different browser. First check. There's that one.
It was a different desktop.
Right. Peace. Set. Yeah.
It's automatic.
Yeah.
You get them?
Fix it from here. Everyone.
Godina. One and two. Check mic. 1 2. 1 2. 2. 2 2. 1 2. 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2. Check microphone 1 2. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. 1 2 1 2. 1 and 2 3 4. So you make one T. One T. Check microphone. One T. One T. 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 One T. T. Check T. One T. Two. T. T. Check microphone. One T. One T. One and T. 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 One T. One T. One T. One T.
sharing on my socials, I've received quite a lot of commentary from my friends and colleagues and all, men, women, everybody asking how, even gentlemen, even men themselves asking how. Actually, the people who I had said are coming to find out from here today how they can get raped. And then people say maybe we are out of topics to discuss, maybe this is, so there are a lot of questions that I think need to be answered here today. I think it's very exciting. I expect the conversation to be very robust, very invigorating, and I suspect that by the time we all leave here this afternoon, we shall have at least learned something new. So in our baraza today, I'm expecting or I'm hoping that we will have a bit of some sort of conceptual clarification from our dear panelists. I expect that, by the time we leave here, we'll get a good understanding of what is it exactly. Is there something special about rape of men, when you compare it to rape of women? Is it a question of the law? Is it a question of our own societal perceptions? Is it that we think, is it something about gender? Is it something about power dynamics? What is it about rape, and why is it that we find it a little bit unbelievable that there can be rape of men, So our panelists today are experts in this, and they are going to be able to take us through. We've got registration sheets moving around for you to kindly fill in. Just see the one that is nearest to you, and then kindly fill in that information for us. In a short while, we'll be hearing welcome remarks from our Director of URIPEC, Dr. Musinje Kabumba, and that will then be followed by the panel discussion, which should take about 1 hour, and thereafter we shall open up for a plenary discussion. Dr. Musinje, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mary, and good afternoon, colleagues from the School of Law. From the civil society, I can see a number of our very good friends from Femfort, from HIRAF, from UKPC, and of course, our panelists today. I know it's a very difficult time in the School of Law because exams are around the corner. This is the last week, in fact, in which any kind of event is possible, because next week people are firefighting as they try to save the semester, as they say. Oh yes, I see some other colleagues also from the legal fraternity. And also for the students, I know that one of the, in contractual terms, they say, one of the representations was that today we will be fed, in terms of the mind, there will be food for thought, but there will also be actual food. And then you must be asking that, yes, you have seen the water, but what about the lunch that was threatened? And just to assure you that that representation still remains true. And very, very shortly, we are going to have a working lunch in which there's food for thought, but also, I see some people saying, no, for sure, Sirimba. There's going to be, I'm looking forward to a very, very robust engagement, intellectually, but also gastronomically. Now, the topic, tumwenyamu, very, very serious. The topic today is the rape of men by women, and it's about analyzing emerging legal and conceptual issues. Now, and I'm glad to see my good friend Kagai, the poet, who has also done a lot of work around this area. And I hope, I know we've been having conversation around having the performance of the poem, and my hope is that this may also set the stage for actually having that finally done, Kagai. So, when people think about rape, ordinarily the thought is the rape of women by men, which of course is extremely pernicious and unfortunately also pervasive, and one of the most unimaginable crimes that goes to the violation of the very core of a human being and what it means to be human and what it means to be dignified. In some of the literature, it has been described as a crime which leaves the victim, and some of the literature calls what was survivors, but leaves the person alive, but with a real cost in terms of quality of life. That when someone mentions that, there's no questioning of what is being talked about. One can also think of the rape of men by men. And in those situations, again, there is no questioning what is being spoken of. In some cases, it's even seen as even worse. Now, part of the case law, and it has come up even in terms of first of all, generally, the rules around corroboration. And one of those famous decisions that came from Justice Echiru Kubinza, that finally said that the rule that requires corroboration in sexual offenses is laden with assumptions about the idea that women lie. And that since women lie, a woman saying, this happened to me, must be corroborated by someone else saying, yes, it's true because. And that problematic assumption around that rule that had arisen, Justice Echiru Kubinza said that should basically be put aside. But you also have cases where some of the evidence or some of the prosecutions faltered because the victim's testimony, in some cases, older persons who have been victimized or more conservative would not be comfortable using the words that the prosecution, the criminal law requires to be used. That you must say, that our panelists will say that this is what happened and you have to describe it in very graphic terms. If I know it's a traumatic experience, but then you have this courtroom, you have a judge, you have it's almost like it's a very sterile. What happened was traumatic, but you're now being asked to describe it. There's a transcriber, there's a court clerk, and they're just interested in the details. They're not really interested in what you went through. It's just, yes, what happened, they want to write, and they want to write exactly. This was this organ and was going there. Then you have this situation of this woman, an older woman, conservative. And you're asking her to describe things which you will not necessarily even describe, even if you're talking about a more pleasurable. So you have some of the case law where I think the lady said, he made me his wife. And that was disallowed as evidence because, again, for the purposes of the court, we want to hear in graphic detail what happened. So already there are those challenges with regard to the rape of women by men. And then you have the challenges that come with the rape of men by men, where you have the trauma and then you have the prejudice. Now, incidentally, some of the reports in Uganda came from northern Uganda, and part of the processes that happened both by the rebels, the LRA, but also according to a number of credible accounts, including those carried out by the Refugee Law Project, which happens to be an outreach activity of the School of Law. That many are not quite aware that the Refugee Law Project is a project of the School of Law. But a lot of important work was done by the Refugee Law Project that detailed credible accounts of the rape of men by government soldiers as a weapon of war, to demoralize, to humiliate. Somehow kill the spirit of a whole, not just one or two individuals, but a whole community. And some of the accounts from that period or from that research talks about silences there, because the silence, you talk about a double trauma. The trauma of being violated, but also the trauma of the idea that if I say it happened to me, somehow I lost something in my masculinity. And some of the accounts, just like the lady was saying, he made me his wife. You had some of the accounts of the survivors of of that trauma saying, they made me a woman. So there you have, again, a strange species of a terrible thing that, in fact, was part of the calculation by the perpetrators, that it will happen to you and you will not have the ability to say what happened to you, and which makes healing that much more difficult. Then you come to the rape of men by women. And that's partly what Mary was talking about. This comes out of a research project undertaken by Mr. Ivan Chase as part of the Master of Laws, and it was so very well done and so ably defended last week at the Vivas that many of the panel members said this should even be a dissertation. It's already, it should be a PhD. Already the depth of the work and the scope of the work was of such a standard that a number of it changed from being a defense of the masters to being a discussion about how the work can be taken to a doctoral level. Even in terms of both quality, but also in terms of quantity, it was evidently superior work. But I remember, as in the early parts of the project, and some of Ivan's colleagues are here, in part of who on the master's program, who also defended ably last week. Initially, in the actual sessions, when Ivan would mention this topic, his colleagues would be laughing. Because for many, they say, how can a woman rape a man? Now, but already though, now that we have the thesis with us and the research, deeply argued, I think the conversation today will be to precisely reflect on this question. But as we reflect on this question, I think some of the thoughts that we should have is why somehow this is the species of rape that is apparently funny. The first one is not. The second one is not. Why is this one incredulous? Why does it invite not only disbelief, but also amusement? Why is it somehow difficult to imagine that a woman can rape a man? And if we somehow imagine it, why is it an imagination that causes some kind of amusement? Is it an assumption of power as to who has power and who doesn't? That somehow men in all situations are powerful and somehow women in all situations are powerless? Is it something going on around those assumptions? Is it assumptions about masculinity, what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman? That somehow there's something that happens in the violation of the man that cannot happen, because how is it possible that a man can be raped? Is the incredulity about the idea that a man is so powerful that he cannot be powerless? Are we saying that men are so powerful that they can never be put in a position where their will is overcome, where they are violated? Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe those are the presumptions that would lead a police officer recording a statement to take a woman seriously who has been raped and to laugh away a man who comes with the same complaint. So the discussion today, that promises to be a very vigorous one, is really about what comes to mind. What are the assumptions, whether acknowledged or unacknowledged, that we carry with us that make certain types of violations recognized as violations, and other kinds of violations brushed away as impossible at best, or even amusing at worst. And if at the end of today's discussion, we somehow accept that it's possible for men to be raped by women, and when that happens, it's a bad thing. If somehow we come to the idea to accept that there might be cases where that happens, what other things then should we perhaps begin to think about? About the nature of power, the nature of vulnerability, the nature of what it means to be a man. So when someone says, be a man, stop crying, be a man, what other things should we ask ourselves about what it means to be a man? How is it allowed to express one's masculinity? Is being a man going through life stoic and staunch as if nothing makes you, not being able to cry or express emotion, not being able as a father to tell your children, I love you, because somehow, paying your school fees, that should, it should ask us to question other things about the assumptions we hold, about masculinity, about sex and sexuality, about gender, about a whole range of things we take that we have said that are binary. There's a man, there's a woman. And I know with the election yesterday, we have a president who has come to the United States and has said, as far as I'm aware, there are men and there are women and there's nothing. Who incidentally happens to be a convicted felon, 34 counts, who himself incidentally has been found liable for sexual assault, who has not made any secret around his apparent ability to grab them by whatever parts. So maybe if that's the person whose ideas about masculinity we're taking with us, maybe today is particularly the day to rethink. Even if that person has been elected president, maybe he might be wrong in the way he thinks about this. Today is not a day for Senior Kawumba to speak. I was just simply asked to welcome you, but I thought it important to locate the discussion today in a certain context around those terms. To say that indeed, as I began, tumwenyamu, very, very serious. To also reiterate the commitment to especially the students, that indeed you are promised food for thought, but not just food for thought, but also gastronomical real food. But also to welcome in a very special way our two panelists, Councillor Ivan Chaze, and also Dr. Daphne Agaba, who is teaches at the School of Gender Studies here at Makerere, and I know Ivan will also be introduced properly. Both of them will be introduced properly by Mary. So just to welcome you all to what promises to be what is an important discussion, but also promises to be a very vigorous. Thank you very well. Thank you all, and welcome to the last baraza of Euripec this semester. Asante.
Thank you so much, Dr. Msinje, for those welcome remarks. Without wasting time, I'm going to invite our first panelist, Mr. Ivan Evans Chaze. Not a lot, but yeah, BK has already said something about him. But Ivan is an accomplished criminal law practitioner with a robust background in public prosecutions. He currently works with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions as a senior state attorney. He's attached to Buganda Road Field Station. He has over 13 years of experience working on very high-stake cases involving trafficking in persons, counter-terrorism, gender-based violence, and other general criminal cases. He has, therefore, a very comprehensive understanding of criminal law, of criminal practice, and it is no wonder the topic that he is going to be discussing with us today. He also has a very good understanding of courtroom procedures and the intricacies of prosecutorial work. He works closely with other law enforcement agencies, preparing and presenting cases, and overall advocating for the best interests of the community in which he exists. He has dedicated his career to upholding justice and ensuring the fair application of law, as well as advocating for improvements in legal processes and practice. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome Mr. Ivan Evans.
Thank you, moderator, for that beautiful introduction. Yes, I wish to observe the protocol that was earlier adopted. Thank you, Dr. Daphne Agaba, for being part of this wonderful discussion for today. And thank you everyone for being here, as well as those who are following us online. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Musinde Kabumba on behalf of Huripec for according me this opportunity to address you all on a topic that is critically important, yet often overlooked, misunderstood, and surrounded by stigma. Yeah, it may appear challenging for some to talk about victimization of men, where women are the offenders. When we think of rape, particularly where men have been raped by women, certain assumptions come to mind. Typically, society imagines men as the perpetrators and women as the victims of rape. While it is true that many reported cases fit within this narrative, we need to acknowledge that there are other stories. Stories of men who experience rape, sometimes at the hands of female perpetrators. This is a reality that many men face. Yet it is rarely discussed openly. In part, this is due to societal stereotypes that make it difficult for male survivors to come forward. Stereotypes that suggest that men are always willing participants in sexual acts, or stereotypes that diminish male victimhood because it does not fit the narratives within the society. Traditional narratives that emphasize and suggest physical force, violence to call out rape, yet there exist many assaults that involve coercion and manipulation. Or situations where a victim may resist, the real victim will fight back, yet many victims experience a freeze response or comply out of fear, guilt, or shame. And they have real consequences for those affected. Men who have been assaulted by women often struggle with feelings of shame and isolation. They are left without an avenue to report, seek justice and support, leaving them in a very difficult position. For instance, there are police annual reports which have been circulated every year. They indicated that sexual violence is on an increase within this country. And within that sexual violence, the aspect of rape of men is also important. Being that I'm in line with public prosecutions, I have encountered serious situations where men come to us sharing their experiences that they go through with their families at home. But because they don't have an avenue to address them, we leave them unattended to. So this kind of situation that is happening in this country, not only in Uganda, but in many parts of the world, has to be looked into. Therefore, my goal in this discussion is to shine on these often hidden experiences and explore the prevalence of male rape, legal aspects, the societal impact on male survivors, and the steps we can take to support those affected. Most importantly, to challenge the harmful stereotypes and assumptions that prevent survivors from seeking justice and compassion. I want to pose this question. Do you believe that men are raped by women? Think about it as we go. For a long time, sexual violence against men has existed, but has relatively received limited attention. This is because the Ugandan society, like in many parts of the world, often consider men as strong and dominant. This makes society believe men are in control of their emotions, men are in control of others, and they are in control of the environment. Believing more so, the law frames men as perpetrators and women as victims of rape, leaving male survivors of rape by women with limited legal recourse. This bias is vividly portrayed under Section 110 of the Ugandan Penal Code, which describes rape as having unlawful carnal knowledge of a woman. Quote that, unlawful carnal knowledge of a woman without her consent. Under this provision, only a male person can be found guilty as a direct participant in a rape case. This is based on the meaning of the phrase carnal knowledge, which has been widely defined in many cases by the judicial officers to mean the penetration of the sexual organ of a woman by a male sexual organ. There are several cases, but I will refer you to two. We have Uganda versus Chamsungu Ivan, and Uganda versus Odwong Dennis and Olanya Dixon. Those cases explain what penetration means. As earlier indicated, it means the penetration of the male reproductive organ into the female reproductive organ. The legal position of rape under the section that I have cited, therefore, frames men as the perpetrators and women as the victims of rape, which is particularly pronounced in judicial practices. this legal treatment of rape remains underdeveloped and often overlooked in this country. Historically, Ugandan society, like in many parts of the world, often associates the physical aggressiveness of men with strength and dominance, rendering male victims of rape by women prone to ridicule, disbelief, or blame by society. The rape laws have been heavily gendered, focusing primarily on female victims and as well as children. This narrow definition of rape overlooks the prevailing complex realities of sexual violence, denying justice to male survivors and limiting the effectiveness of the legal framework that we have. Today, male victims continue to face physical and psychological harm, including untreated sexually transmitted infections, anxiety, and depression, denial to justice, and penetration. Such a gap within our law leaves our country with no effort to prevent sexual violence against men, in particular rape, and encouraging the harmful stereotypes that exist in our society. If these effects are not addressed early enough, they may become challenging to address in the near future. Ending this crime requires not only the reform of the law, but it also requires policy reforms to be in place. It requires to sensitize the community to challenge harmful gender norms and also to engage the stakeholders in having a clear set of mind to shift away from the traditional narratives and reduce stigma by increasing public awareness, gender-sensitive support services such as shelters, counseling, and legal aid. The FIDA report that was published in 2011 speaks to this. There are different theories that exist that may explain this kind of problem that exists in our society. In my research, I looked at two major theories. The first one was the possessional theory into violent behaviors. Why should a woman or a man coerce each other into sex? I also considered the theory of traumatic bonding. This theory explains how both men and women can create a bond which appears to be abusive. The traumatic bonding theory explains further that what can make a man to continue in a relationship which is abusive. Usually these abusive relationships are seemingly followed by gifts, apologies from the abuser. And you find that the man who is being abused depends on the lady or a woman who is abusing him sexually. These theories are applied differently in both men and women, but particularly, let us look at men. Like the traumatic bonding theory, the way it operates, what keeps this man in a relationship that is aware is already abusive. Victims will always feel that the society will not believe them. Okay? The social stigma and shame. The man will feel that if he discloses, they may think that he's a weak person. There is also emotional blackmail. The female perpetrators may adopt that kind of approach towards the male victims, that if you disclose, I will blackmail you. Men also are believed to be strong and self-reliant. Because of that, there are so many men that are breathing silently because society believes they are strong and self-reliant. These theories in my research helped me to have a comprehensive understanding of how societal perceptions of gender roles, power dynamics, and emotional response cause rape of men by women. I remember at the start, I asked you, do you believe men can be raped by women? Indeed, men are forced to have sex without their consent under these situations. One, there's what we call drug-facilitated rape. A woman perpetrator can administer a drug on a man to adjust that man's thinking or the ability to give full consent. There are drugs that actually exist on markets that can increase the sexual desires. Okay? I think those young people know about those drugs. Once they have been administered on someone, he becomes wild and may not have a proper sense of direction, and may not willingly engage in the sexual act. We have also the aspect of the perpetrators taking advantage of incapacity. If a man is unable to give consent due to physical incapacitation, for instance, there is a recent case that happened in the United Kingdom. Lord Tanya had sex with a sleeping man. And for the first time in the UK, that lady was convicted of engaging in a sexual activity without the consent of the man. It was the first of its kind. But UK, like Uganda, their legal provisions on rape do not cater for rape. There's also the instance where the male victim may be unconscious or healed. And when the female perpetrator is on heat, she can take that gap. Okay? She may think that she cannot wait this man to heal, but under such circumstances, the man can be forced. There is also another aspect of exploitation of power or authority. In a case where a woman holds a position of power or authority over a man, such as in a workplace or academic environment, she may use her influence to coerce a man into sexual acts. I would give you an example. I read the research that was conducted by Eclaim Judith Obor. It was a research on the influence of sexuality on male sexual violence against men. In her research, one of the respondents was a driver of a certain expatriate. This lady wanted to have love with this man, but the man declined. He was still a young man. The lady was in her late 40s. Now, a time came when the lady wanted to move out of the country. He calls her driver to come at home, pick her, and then take her to Entebbe International Airport. The driver picked his boss, took her back home, and she went to prepare herself. But as she was in the bedroom, she left her door halfway closed. Then she started screaming. This innocent driver thought that the lady maybe, she has got some kind of emergency. The man responded. Upon reaching, the man found when his boss was naked. Immediately, the lady started now approaching the man. You see, I love you. So just imagine what happened now. Just imagine. So should I conclude that story? Now, to cut short the long story, the man had sex without his full consent, but he feared to lose his job. Now, that is the problem we have in society. That society thinks that a man is a willing participant in every sexual activity. It's not true. Then another aspect, there also is a situation where a man may be manipulated by a female. Manipulation. Much as men think that they have the physical strength, but women have the feminine power that they can employ to manipulate a man to engage into a sexual activity. You see? That's why you will find that usually men think they can easily go into a private space with a woman without getting worried, thinking that they are strong. But a woman will be worried to go into a private space with a man. But today, women can use their feminine power to manipulate and rape men. There is also the other aspect of emotional coercion. For instance, if a woman pressures a man by threatening self-harm, saying she will ruin his reputation or manipulate other emotional vulnerabilities to make him engage in sexual activity unwillingly, I think that one is very common today. Today, people think that coercion or force, a woman can use coercion or force, but it is limited, as I earlier indicated that. Now, having said that, we have a problem of legal definition of rape. Not only in this country, but in many parts of the world. There is no agreed upon universal definition of rape. The definition varies across jurisdictions. In many legal systems, rape has traditionally been defined as an act committed by a male perpetrator against a female victim, often requiring penile penetration. Such definitions exclude cases where men are raped by women, limiting male survivors' access to justice. This narrow definition is increasingly being challenged, with some jurisdictions broadening their definitions to make rape more inclusive and gender neutral. Similarly, international legal standards are shifting toward gender neutral definitions of sexual violence. This shift is influencing national laws, pushing for reforms that recognize male survivors in all forms of sexual violence cases. In Uganda, I am aware that there is Sexual Offences Bill of 2024, which was recently retabled before Parliament. And I think that bill, it says a lot, just as this topic is on the right track. It advocates to have a specific law of sexual violence offenses, and it goes further to define rape. Laws are increasingly recognizing that men, like women, can be coerced, intimidated, or otherwise pressured into non-consensual sexual acts, thereby challenging traditional notions of consent and coercion. For instance, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, though it never dealt with the rape of men by women, but dealt with the sexual violence. In its landmark case of prosecutor versus Jinpo Akayesu, it described rape as a physical version of a sexual nature committed on a person under circumstances which are coercive. This definition is very important in this discussion. It is more inclusive and gender neutral. It tries to deal with the traditional notions of rape. The physical invasion encompasses various forms of sexual violence going beyond the penile penetration that we know of today in our law, thereby broadening the ingredients of rape. Because what we know in our penalizing law, the ingredients are so restricted or limited to penile vagina penetration. The law ignores other forms like mouth and anal penetration. They are not considered under that law. It is archaic and outdated. So that landmark decision in that tribunal was also followed in the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, which adopted also a similar definition of rape, making it more inclusive and gender neutral. Similarly, the international conventions, such as the Rome Statute of the ICC, also offer an inclusive and gender neutral definition. It defines rape as an act where a perpetrator invades the body of a person by force, threat of force, coercion, or taking advantage of a coercive environment without the victim's consent. This definition covers all forms of non-consensual penetration, irrespective of the victim's gender. Generally, there are global reforms taking place aiming at neutralizing rape law amidst resistance, stereotypes, and stigma. For instance, countries like United Kingdom, USA, India, South Africa, Rwanda, and Philippines have updated their penal laws to make them gender neutral. I will give an example of India. India attempted to include rape of men, but it received resistance from women movements who were claiming that their interests would be hurt. And India reversed that law on that basis. But still, it maintains a somewhat gender neutral law that caters for men too. My recommendations. Based on my findings in my research study, I recommend both legal reforms and policy reforms. Our country needs to update its rape law to make it more inclusive and gender neutral, as to support male victims by recognizing the full spectrum of sexual violence and provide equal legal recourse and protections. That implies that they have to look at Section 110 of the Penal Code Act by borrowing the ideas from the president's, the decisions that were set in the international tribunals. I also recommended that there is need to reform the procedure of presenting evidence. Dr. Lusinge Kabumba, in his remarks, put it rightly that even the female victims, what they go through, is as if they are going through a second rape. It is some kind of storytelling that someone has to go through the ordeal that she went through many years ago. This one should also be looked into. I would share one experience that I'm not going to mention the name. In 2012, I was a young state attorney in the office of the DPP. For the first time, I was handling capital cases in the High Court. And I had one case which made me have sleepless nights. And it was involving a lecturer from one of the universities in this country. She was attacked by armed robbers. They robbed her laptop and the dollars. On top of that, she was told to carry the laptop. They also instructed the maid to follow her. They moved out of the house like 100 meters. The men were 3. In number, they had a gun, AK-47. The lady was told to lie down. She was left, one after the other. Then they told the maid to push her hands into her private parts and clear the victim's face. After that, she was instructed to go back, and these people went away. She went back home, but because these armed robbers had already tied the man, now she informs the husband that have been raped, escort me to Mulago Hospital to seek treatment. The man backed at her. You are stupid. The woman went to hospital. When she came back the following day, they divorced. So after the case was reported, she recorded her statements. Now at the time of preparing for her case, she tells me that, please, I don't want to go through what I went through many years ago, because the case had taken like 3 years. I lost my first marriage. I don't want to lose my second marriage. You see? Now, I had to write an opinion to the DPP to have the matter withdrawn from court. But the good thing, we had a parallel case which had been filed in the military court of being in possession of the firearm. So we abandoned the rape case and we concentrated on the other case. So I confirm what Dr. Musinde Kabumba was saying. The victimization that victims go through has to change. I also considered capacity building, increasing outreach and public awareness with gender inclusive education and sexual violence to dismantle harmful stereotypes and encourage women to report incidents and seek help. Also skilling first respondents, improving evidence storage systems, and also rape should be treated as a crime other than a moral offense. My study highlighted the need for public awareness and education campaigns to challenge harmful stereotypes. Education initiatives should be implemented so as to sensitize law enforcement, healthcare providers, and the general public about male sexual assault. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening with an open mind and for being part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chaze, for your presentation. It was good to hear from you, from your experience as a researcher, someone who has really gone into this, but also your practical experience as a prosecutor. I'm sure that several issues have been raised that are going to be discussed and that we're going to get into in the coming sessions. And but before I invite the next panelist, I just wanted to inform you that the lunch is here. We were not lying. We were not lying. The lunch is here. I'm sure those of you who are up there can already see it through the window. But we are going to first hear from the panelists, and then the lunch will be served after the baraza. So, a round of applause for Mr. Chaze. I wonder if you're starting to feel like maybe perhaps men can be raped. I don't know, are there certain issues that he has raised that make you start to question whether indeed it is possible for men to be raped? Questions surrounding consent, for example, what does it mean to consent? Must there be force for there to be rape? Certain questions like that I think are going to be addressed in due course. But for now, let me invite Dr. Daphne K. Agaba. Dr. Daphne K. Agaba is a lecturer at the School of Women and Gender Studies here at Makerere University. Prior to that, she was a postdoctoral fellow at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, which is affiliated with the University of South Africa. Dr. Agaba holds a PhD from the Faculty of Law, University of Western Cape, which she attained in August 2017. She also holds a master's degree in human rights and democratization in Africa from the University of Pretoria. Her areas of academic engagement and research include gender, health law and policy, political leadership and governance, human rights, decoloniality, to mention, but only a few. Let's put our hands together to welcome Dr. Agaba.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rape against men perpetrated by women. I was called by Dr. Kabumba about a week ago, exactly today. And he told me about this topic and about how I was going to present. And the topic struck me as it has struck many of you. And throughout the course of the week, as I prepared for this discussion, apart from the fact that I had to read 217 pages of a master's thesis, you know, it's a double-edged sword when a student writes very well. You have to read and engage with that, but at the same time, I must say it was 217 pages of very good and analytical thoughts. Probably, if they've not been expressed to you as well as they were put down, I hope you get the chance for some of you to get that 217 pages that I had to read in 5 days. As I prepared for that discussion, I asked myself this question several times. How are men raped by women exactly? So in order to find answers to this question, I did a poll among my male friends and among the males I know, because they could tell me this about this. And I started getting very interesting insights. I'm going to just give two of the insights I got from the men. The good thing is that I have very many friends, so you will not be able to know who exactly told me what. One of my male friends told me that he has a friend who has a friend for purposes of anonymity, and he is married. And at the time when he was married with 2 children, he expressed to his wife that he did not want to add to those children. He wanted to maintain the 2 children because of the rising costs and everything. The wife told him that she wanted to have 3 children and she wanted to have the 3rd child right away. So they went through a back and forth with this discussion. You know how, for those who are married, don't know, that environment can be when you're trying to negotiate the space at that level. And he said that it became too bad that one time he was sleeping and he woke up and his wife was on top of him. The wife told him, you don't have to do anything. You just have to watch as I finish what I started. Since you do not want to have a child, and I quote him, me, I want. So I asked him the question that I'm sure is in everyone's mind today. Was the organ cooperating? He said, very much so. But I was half awake. I went back to my half-asleep situation. She did what she wanted, and we finished the ordeal. To be honest with you, in as much as we are married, for me, I felt raped, I felt violated, and I felt like this had been taken against my will. So then I started understanding this topic that I also doubted. And I asked another colleague. The colleague shared this in his group. And the group told him, we cannot talk about this because of how society perceives us. But I want you to know that we have had those incidences. One of the people in that group told him that still a married man, they had challenges with his wife and they enlisted the help of a pastor to come and talk to them. When the pastor talked to them, they went on and on about the problems, for him he could not say what the problem was. And the problem was, according to him, the wife was more interested in sex than he was. And so the wife assumed that just because he was not interested in sex, he was giving this sex somewhere else. And that was at the root of their marital problem. But as you know, presenting problems and real problems, when they went to see the pastor, they talked about, he does not listen to me, he does not do what, he does not, and on they went. When the counseling session ended, he followed the pastor outside. And he told the pastor, I do not sleep well. The woman demands sex almost every night. Whether I'm tired, whether I don't want to, she demands sex. And that is the reason I could not say that there. 2 incidences. So, can men be raped by women? Is the question that is before us today. I agree with Councillor Evans about the law in Uganda. In Uganda, as you know, we have archaic colonial laws, and the law that he's talking about is the penal code, which only talks about the penile penetration of the vagina, and assumes, he says that very well, and I don't want to contradict him, that the rape that is recognized is when the penis penetrates the vagina. There is no, it's a give, it cannot be a take, because that is the rape that he is recognized in Uganda, and he argues that the law has to change to reflect international law and other laws that have started changing, just like the sexual offences bill. So, in discussing today's topic, why I was called in this panel, was to bring a gender source to this discussion. You know, I always worry when people tell me to bring gender sources. It's almost like when you're in a meeting and then you're the woman there and they say, it's mainstream for us that people just assume that whatever the topic is, you know the gender nuances, you know, and you will ably represent that. Let me first talk about my positionality, because for gender, that is very important. Before before I came today, first of all, I identify as she or her, and I've done work on feminism and gender. And for us gender scholars, positionality is very important in your research. Why is positionality very important? Because we believe gender experiences are lived, deeply nuanced, subjective, multidisciplinary, and subjective, not objective. And the first position that the colonial gender scholars have taken is to refute the notion that we are objective beings. The work and research we do is always deeply informed by our experiences and worldview. And instead of anesthesizing the work we do, our experiences should enrich this work. So we do not present work as neutral, universal, objective. We admit our positioning right away and then use that to enrich the study. In doing so, this allows us to decolonize and engender the work which for a long time has not been written for us. So back to the presenter. I agree in the interim with the entire discussion, and I'm not going to repeat what he says, but what I am going to focus on is how the gender position that is taken in the entire thesis. Throughout the thesis, the author uses words like genderized, gender biased, and gender neutral. And even when he was speaking here, he said the word gender neutral at least 5 times. The way the words are used are in ways that for the first time I interact with from a different perspective. Because every time you hear about gender bias, gender non-focused, it's always the other way around. It's always laws do not pertain to women. So this is the first time I hear someone talking about gender bias from the sense of the man, so to speak. His definition of gender neutral, or his recommendation in that thesis, is to revise the Ugandan rape law so that it's applicable to all. And that is my point of this departure. While I agree that the Ugandan law needs to be revised and sanitized of its colonial elements, as set out in the penal code, to comprehensively cater for men raped by women. In fact, while preparing this discussion, that is when I came across the Sexual Offences Bill, which has set out a very broad discussion on rape, which I would argue is broader than Councillor Evans would find more palatable, maybe, for his discussion. However, in the thesis, the author negates, glosses over, intentionally and unintentionally underplays the importance of certain nuanced issues of the study. My point of view is that the acknowledgement of one element, in this case, female and male rape, should not negate the centrality or importance of the other elements, such as the underlying reasons for the overemphasis on male and female rape. And why do I say this? Still from the thesis, I feel like the author underplays the gender or power dynamics of rape in trying to prove his argument. He repeatedly alludes to the need to sensitize the rape law of its gender elements, thereby calling for the need for a gender-neutral law. This assertion decontextualizes rape from its societal position. Rape doesn't happen in the abstract. Rape is a manifestation of how power operates, and this power is still very largely male-centric. The Ugandan society is still a deeply patriarchal society where the function of power is exclusively and almost often held by men, exercised over women, and rape, justifiably, is the prime example of how this power is wielded. This power play does not only affect women, but it hierarchizes men into those who are powerful and those who are not, powerful. In fact, I wanted to say that I'm very excited that this discussion is finally coming up because finally, men are going to start taking seriously our concerns. An example of this, because we've been crying, we are now with you, we've been crying. Welcome to the class. I want to start to give an example of the discussions in Uganda on marital rape. When the Domestic Relations Bill, which later turned into the Marriage and Divorce Bill, which now there's a marriage bill before Parliament. By the way, the conversation on the marriage bill is as old as Uganda, or even older, I could argue, 1957 with the Kalema Commission. In that discussion of the Domestic Relations Bill, activists and feminist scholars said marital rape is a very big challenge that they face. When this bill was put before Parliament, the male legislators essentially laughed the women legislators out of Parliament. What did they say? They said, if you're my wife and I married you, under what circumstances would you say that I raped you? And how did I start this discussion today? By talking about marital rape, this time perpetrated against the men. So it is my hope and prayer that now that men want to be written into the law, to be included into the law, they will now start to understand the real plight that women face that we've been talking about. In fact, marital rape was removed completely from any law. Even the marriage bill doesn't have it. The Domestic Violence Act doesn't have it. The Sexual Offences Act, I'm yet to look at it, but it doesn't have it. So my question is, now that men want to be written into the rape law, will we see marital rape come again? Since the examples might apply to both of us. So this power play can best be represented by statistics, and most of these statistics are offered by the author. The author talks about the fact that rape stands at 35% among women, and those who have experienced it in their lifetime are 81%, while rape among men is 17%, with the numbers thought to go all the way to 43%, but because men don't talk about rape issues, we never get to know the real statistics. In Uganda, 1 in every 3 women is a victim of sexual violence. A very vivid example here is, if you conducted a very simple survey of women and versus men in this room, all matters being constant, and by those matters I mean the fear of men talking about their rape experiences, the hands going up of rape or near rape situations will be able to tell you this answer. I will not subject you to such an exercise. The other factor that is highlighted by the author is the very low rate of conviction of rape cases, which means, even as we are talking about men, it's not yet uhuru for women, not even close. If uhuru is here, they are about 100 years away from that. Let me give you an example. The author says, out of the 1,365 reported cases in 2013, 365 were taken to court, and they resulted in 5 convictions. Picture 1,365 and picture 5 convictions. Is that a law that is working for its people? In 2014, 1,419 cases were reported to the police. 423 were taken to court, and 9 convictions were made. This, in line with this, is also the perpetual underfunding and underprioritization of sex-related cases, but also more broadly, sexual and gender-based violence cases. In 2016-2017, the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development said it had only 10 staff, which was an insignificant fraction of the workforce that was required to act. So, while the author rightly says that rape law has mostly focused on women. An honest inquiry should also be asking not only why this is the case, but has that rape law benefited the women to whom it is purported to play to? The other aspect that is overstepped by the author is the aspect of male rape. The author here has talked about male rape, and I liked that. Sorry, I'm calling you the author because that is why I kept reading your name. So while the thesis focuses on female marital rape, on male rape, the author certainly merges statistics for both male on male rape and female on male rape, which ends up presenting a picture of a bigger number than what it actually is. But while staying silent on the aspect of male on male rape. The aspect of male on male rape is so silent in the thesis that the only time the author alludes to it is when it starts talking about outside laws like the South African law on sodomy. Even when mentioning Ugandan laws, there is a complete sidestepping of this aspect, despite the extensive scholarly work, most especially around the Anti-Homosexuality Act. The question I ask myself, why this sidestepping of this elephant in the room? I want to give you to put the male rape in a gendered focus. I would like to give you the case study of DRC, for instance. In DRC, 1 in 4 men have experienced sexual violence. Yet, despite these statistics, few people have asked where this violence comes from. While women are disproportionately affected by sexual and gender violence, this does not make it exclusive to women. The kind of rape faced by men in Congo includes rape, genital mutilation, enforced nudity, involuntary sterilization, and all these are perpetrated against both men and women. All these are despite the common misconception, as said by counsel, that men are predisposed to enjoy sex under any circumstance. Resembling violence against women, SGBV against men is most often perpetrated by men in this context. It occurs outside the household. The perpetrators are often their acquaintances, their neighbors, and family members. In this kind of one male survivor of sexual assault explained this act. He said, they wanted revenge for a previous attack by his people. Sex in this account is not related to pleasure. It is employed as a tool for expressing power and dominance, concepts which are closely tied to masculinity. Back to our gender topics that our author keeps sort of sidestepping. Seen from a gendered lens, sexual violence is a result of pre-existing gender dynamics and strict gender roles magnified by war and conflict. When interviewed, victims' testimonies relate violence to one or both of the following dynamics: dominance and emasculation. These are often overlapping and often coexistent. In fact, for masculinity, rape is so damaging because it is rooted in the ability to exert power over other people and protect oneself from them. Both of these genders experience this kind of humiliation. But for men, it takes on a specific role especially in the DRC. One of the men said this: they wanted us to feel as though we were women. And he says, this is the worst insult, to feel like a woman. Another survivor states that his rapists considered him their woman, forcing him to wash their clothes and take care of their children. His rape, he explained, had transformed him from a man into the wife of those soldiers. What is he saying about women in this account? He is exposing the reality of gender hierarchy. Perpetrators and the perpetrators of sexual violence know this. They know that in expressing aggressive, hegemonic masculinity, which they are clearly on the top with the male survivors of SGBV somewhere below. This highlights the very clear unequal relationship, the one between men and women, where womanhood is perceived as the worst insult. The position of a woman, therefore, remains at the bottom of the hierarchy. Therefore, sexual violence is not only a gendered issue, it's also a result of homophobia, negative connotations of homosexuality, starkly present in the DRC, which make the rape of men by men uniquely damaging. The male victims are often considered homosexualized, in part because of their sexual contact with men, but also because understanding of sexuality does not allow weakness in heterosexual men. A heterosexual man is considered to be strong. Therefore, by raping them, this is seen as weakening them, seen from their accounts. In short, pre-existing harsh gender roles are exploited and expressed through sexual violence against both men and women. In men's cases, SGPV is used to disempower them, destroy their communities, sense of safety, and deprive them of their masculinity through dominance and emasculation. Understanding these dynamics is vital if we are to end cycles of rape and sexual violence as they equip us to tackle with the roots of the problem. The other element is the one of de facto and de jure equality, often commonly known as substantive equality. The kind of equality that is forwarded by the author in his extensive work is the one of formal equality, where it talks about gender-neutral laws that cater equally for men and women. By proposing a gender-neutral rape law, the author essentially presupposes the same treatment, often referred to as formal equality, while in actuality, there's got to be understanding that the treatment of women and men sometimes, almost times, leads to inequality. To this end, CEDAW and other mechanisms propose the substantive equality approach. The substantive approach recognizes that in order to redistribute resources, benefits, power, specific measures should be in place to promote women's rights in order to transform the unequal power relations between men and women in the process. It also recognizes that men and women cannot be treated the same, and for equality of results to occur, women and men may need to be treated differently. Seen from the perspective that we are talking about today, is women have been very vocal about how they are treated when they report cases of rape. And the author also touched on that. And so in looking at a substantive equality approach is to understand the shortcomings of our law in dealing with rape against both men and women, and how those shortcomings can be adjusted, not in the sense of formal equality, but substantively in order to achieve equal results. It goes to say that if you're standing here and I am standing here, we are not the same. So we cannot be treated equally, the same formally and by law. And this I showed you by showing you the statistics of rape and how it manifests for the men and the women. Related to that, and as I already explained about that, is rape as a weapon of war should be our inroad into understanding the relationship between power and rape. Thus, rape cannot be viewed in an abstract sense, but rather in a sense of a patriarchal, pervasively capitalistic world that we live in that creates fertile ground for wars and conflicts. And then when this conflict happens, it's used to subdue the opponent and the people who are considered to be weak to the advantage of those who are considered to be strong. The pervasiveness of rape during conflict has led to it being recognized formally in international war crime. This is not a mistake. This is a deliberate attempt. And I wanted to read for you a few ways in which rape has been used in war. In Rwanda, between 100,000 and 250,000 women were raped during the 3 months of genocide in 1994. UN agencies estimate that more than 60,000 women were raped during the civil war in Sierra Leone, and at least 200,000 in the Democratic Republic of Congo. At times, these women were deliberately infected with HIV and rendered capable of bearing children. Even after the conflict had ended, the effects of sexual violence persisted, including unwanted pregnancies. In northern Uganda, women came back with children of soldiers. And when they got back home, they were refused by their communities because these children had been born in what the community preserved to be circumstances that were against their lives. These women until now are still asking for compensation, for inclusion, to be seen, and for their children to be recognized. So this should tell us the pervasively powerful dynamics at the heart of the war, imbued with strongly gendered nuances which cannot be overlooked. And this is often for the purpose of dehumanizing, subjugating, dominating, and subduing the weaker sex as the woman, but also using the woman of the opposite. For instance, the Hutu-Tutsi war of the genocide. If the Hutu use the woman or rape the woman of a Tutsi, they consider that to be a win for them. In a way, they are taking you over. So all this is done to the woman's body. So what do I propose in light of this? Since we've seen that rape against men and against women is both an exercise of power and itself as a process of control that extends beyond the act of rape, we need to crucially explore rape as a tool for power, which is usually codified in laws, fortified by institutions, carried out in battlefields, in bedrooms, and permeating all threats in our daily lives. This is to say, rape is a political act. The concept of rape culture must extend beyond the horizon of just gender-neutral laws or even male dominance over women to include very many aspects, including heteronormativity of laws, xenophobia, colonialism, capitalism, gender imbalances, all of which interact to make a situation of the powerful and the powerless. So redefining rape in an intersectional way redirects focus to power that is exercised as a result of enforcing this rape culture. An intersectional approach acknowledges that rape is endured by individuals of every race, class. However, there are nuances to this seen from gender numbers, age, sexuality, and other identity, meant to occupy and put powerlessness and power between two different binaries. Thus, sexual violence is an essential tactic to maintain the capitalist heteropatriarchal establishment. That is to say, patriarchy does not negatively affect women. It is also negatively affecting men, and as soon as men realize this, that they are breaking under the rock of patriarchy. Dr. Kabumba started off by talking about the fact when a man says he was raped, why do people laugh? They laugh because a man has been socialized to be strong, to be heterosexual, to take over, to the point that sometimes the more aggressive you are, the more you are rewarded. We all know how sex is perceived for men and women, whereby body count adds marks to men and takes away the marks from women. But by acknowledging patriarchy, we are saying it does not only adversely affect women, it also adversely affects men. Allow me to end there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agaba. I think then that the discussion has now been taken further, taken beyond the law into other dynamics, and I think that there might be some questions at this point in time. I want to open up the floor for questions. We'll take all the questions at once and then have our panelists respond. As I move around taking questions, this is also a reminder for those of you who have not yet registered to kindly please remember to pass by and register, or you could simply put up your hand and we see where you are, and then we bring the registration forms to you. So, questions? Questions? Questions or comments?
I'm actually not asking a question, I'm commenting. Penelope Sanyu, I work with a feminist organization called Farm for Uganda. I'm grateful for this conversation. I was telling Bike yesterday that this is not only timely, it's also going to create a lot of conversation that has long been awaited for. I'm going to comment mostly on, because everything that I wanted to say, I've been showing her in my book that everything I wanted to say, Daphne has addressed in her presentation, and I'm glad that you both put yourselves out here to share what everybody is thinking and are probably shy to say, but to also allow us to think critically about the issues that you bring here. One of the things that I want to emphasize is the thing you kept saying, that rape laws are gendered. They are very gendered, and your solution to them being gendered being creating a bill or another law to support men. I think that so rape in itself as a tool for power and domination and humiliation and indignifying people is problematic. The current laws in not addressing that power imbalance are problematic. Creating a new law is not going to engender the laws or the situation. Creating a new law is going to create a new problem that's going to take us back 1,000 years to do women's rights work, to get women to be seen yet again. Because like Daphne said, women have been saying the same things you're saying today for thousands and thousands of years, and we have been told, you're pretending. What were you wearing? You seduced the man. What you know? Things like that. And now that men are saying it, all of a sudden, everybody should shake and shut up and listen, because the men who are ideally seen by patriarchy as more powerful are now saying, we are also being raped, please listen to us. I will leave that at that. Marital rape. Marital rape. I'm curious about the example that you gave, because I still do not understand. You still need to finish that story. I don't understand how we moved from sexual harassment to rape. What you described for me is a case of sexual harassment. I walk into a room, my boss is naked. It's sexual harassment. I can run away. I can choose to scream as well and call for help, because those are the things you men tell us all the time. Why didn't you scream? Why did you call for help? So did the man undressing for you, was the room locked? If the man undressed for you, did it mean take off your panties as well? So I'm asking you the same questions, really. If this man walked into a room and this woman was screaming, and at what point did it become take off my pants and penetrate her, and then it became rape? I don't understand the thin line there, but I'll stop there. I have so many comments to make, and I don't want to make this about me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Dr. Pique, like you predicted, very interesting discussion. And Ivan, thank you for the presentation and the topic. Very insightful. And Doctor, you still chose the right person to counter Ivan's arguments. I think he got his metric. And one, you see, the topic raises so many questions and issues. And one, we agree there is the reality is the problem is there. And how did we get there? The how did we get there? I want Daphne to address her mind to the how we got there, especially the role of women in the building of the patriarchal society. From the conversation that the questions that doctor posed at the beginning, the mother that tells this young boy, building this resilient young man, this young man to be resilient, the young man to always expect that when it comes to sex life, one, it is the man that is the beneficiary of the sex life, and therefore should work towards getting the sex. And therefore, if they cannot do what it takes to get it, then that is where the issues of rape, marital rape, etc. come in. So I wanted Daphne to address the role of women in building this patriarchal setting. This young boy and what they have to do in order to get there, up to what they have to do in order to get the sex. And that in the idea that it should be the man to pay for the sex, it should be the man to pay for the wife in form of dowry, etc. It should be the man to say, even locally, the word impako, it cannot be the other way around. Right from the start, you are made to believe that it is you to ask for it, because it is you who needs it. Can't the mother have a role in playing that level, as in leveling the ground? It is not a one-way traffic, but for both of us. Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Atkwasi Amisha. I'm in year one. I'm very grateful for the keynote speech that we have had today. And previously, I've been having questions about, let's say, defilement, like apart from rape, like extension of this, such a discussion of defilement by boys, because even in the penal code, it talks about defilement of a girl under the age of 18 years. Like, we do not actually give much attention to that. What about, because you see most times that boys, like sometimes that even the boy child, like below the age of, most boys who lose their virginities at, let's say, below 18, it's usually because they have had sex, especially with older women. And some of them, it's not because they have consented, but maybe because they've been manipulated to believe that it is true that it will be a man if you lose your virginity at this way. And like, does that also amount into, like, can they also consider that as defilement? Why do they only look at the girl child? That they say that whether she consented or what, like it's a strict liability test, but then like, can they also extend such a discussion to the defilement of boys below the age of 18? Then another comment was about educational programs to teach men boundaries and consent. Like, where does the boundary of sexual, like, where do your sexual boundaries start and where do they stop? Like, if we keep on educating people about our sexual boundaries and consent, that would also help. Then encouraging people to talk about their abuse. I don't think most times, like men, it is common, like I'm not being prejudicial or anything, but it is common that men will tell their fellow men that how can you be raped and something like that. And if you've been in, let's say, like it's a young boy, like if you say that he slept, like let's say with that other one, they'll be like, ooh, like is that too much hype for making it seem like it is right? Then there's a lot of media misrepresentations on male victimhood. Like you find that podcasts where people are talking, I will quote without shame, and where they make you feel like you are supposed to be acting in some kind of way to be a so they implant kind of these like doctrines in boys to make them think that they can never be a weak gender or anything like that. And the legal protections, that researchers if we're talking about them, but then the legal protections that are put in place to talk about defilement and rape of, let's say, the male gender, like the boys, like people will not like how do people take such legal like protection seriously because like there's a lot of unawareness like people do not make the boys aware like when they are young and even when they are grown men like you got like they go for example maybe they could go to bars and they usually like discuss about these things and then like you find people are this like the legal protection I believe that also the men themselves need to start supporting their friends like have a sense of brother like how first like the girls you find sisterhood that someone was raped and then like you're finding a way of solving it, but then they contextualize it as being gay, which I don't believe is the truth because we are all human. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think she's a moderator. To begin with, I want to thank Dr. Kawumba for organizing a beautiful conversation. But most importantly, I also want to salute Council Chaze for a well-delivered paper. Thank you very much. My problem will emanate from a submission from Dr. Agaba, where she seemed to suggest, but before that, my name is Moses Omushugujugu, and I'm a third-year law student and a GRC. When you look at the case of Al versus Amkeo, women refused to be referred to as mere chattels. But in the submission of Dr. Agaba, she seems to suggest that women, they do a lot of hilarious activities on their bodies and forget the fact that also men have bodies. But also, where do you find the problem in having equality before the law as enshrined in the Article 21 of the Constitution? You seem to suggest that the proposal by Council Chaze of having new laws that are gender neutral, you seem not happy with it, and I find really a very big conundrum with your assertion. Then lastly, I want to assure you, Dr. Agaba, that most men are being raped, but they are dying in silence. By mere fact that our tradition and culture, a man is perceived to be superiority complex, and they feel shy to shout. They have been banging tables silently. Maybe we can encourage them to bang tables so loud. Otherwise, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Diana Nabimanya. I am a lawyer and I work with a feminist organization. Now, there is a lot that has been said, but I'm going to just tackle what he has said a little bit. I think he understands the concept. He's just failing to drive it home. He's just failing to fully conceptualize it because if you're talking about superiority complex, that's the patriarchy in itself. And the patriarchy is affecting you and I. And that is exactly what Dr. Agaba was talking about. Now, I digress, but my point here was on my biggest issue on the question of rape for men. It usually comes up when women speak up on their own rape. It's usually just a whataboutism question. It's never a question that they want to address seriously. And that is the biggest problem men have. A woman is going to claim she is going to say she has been raped. And the first thing men are going to say, we are also raped. They do not care if the other men are raped. They only care to invalidate what the woman has said. And that, again, is very counterproductive. And it also takes away from the concept or the issue that men are also raped. And finally, on the issue of rape having a neutral law, my problem with that situation is we tend to forget that rape happens. Yes, it happens to both of us, but it happens in both ways. There are different ways, rather. There are different things that inform the rape for women and rape for men. These things are very separate, and we have to address them in a way that is separate. If we are going to address them, we have to keep in mind that the question of equity. You cannot have equality without equity. Equity in itself leads you to equality. You're not going to say that men in themselves, you're not going to say that men are raped just because they are going to be raped because they want to emasculate them, right? But emasculation fits into misogyny, which affects women in a deeper way. And that alone shows you that the people who are most affected by rape are the women. And we need to constantly keep that in mind while we address the issue of rape for men. If you're going to address rape for men, keep in mind that we cannot have equal laws because rape doesn't affect us in the same way. Rape doesn't happen to us in the same way. And yes, it doesn't happen to us in the same way. Why? Yes, it doesn't. Because the power dynamics are different. Men hold the power here. You understand? And if they're going to rape you, even when they rape you as a man, they are trying to make you look like a what? A woman. That in itself is a problem. And those are things we need to address as men and women. Look at how rape happens to both of us. Look for laws that address these things in a way that addresses them with equity in mind. And just a question for Councillor Chaze. Mine was on the issue of marital rape too. And what is being done to address this issue besides the movements that we keep sitting in conferences, we keep discussing this, we keep pushing back on the parliament. But what is being done in the criminal justice system of the country? Because I'm not in the criminal justice system, so I do not know what exactly you're doing as the people who are talking about things like rape and marital rape and all this. Thank you very much.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Fahad. This question is to the second panelist. She linked SGBV to homophobia. How is SGBV a result of homophobia? Then also the second panelist opened the Pandora's box of marital rape. And I did not hear Councillor Chaze highlighting the difference between the fact that with rape against men, it's mostly in relationships. My boss, my wife. Whereas with women, a woman can be raped by a total stranger off the street. So that should be highlighted in this piece. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ajuka Caroline Dorothy, and I'm a student at the School of Gender, and I want to agree with the previous speaker and the one who spoke before him on the issue of rape does not happen in the same way for men and women. We have something called consent, but there is something called full consent and there is just mere consent. Now, full consent comes along with you've accepted, like it is voluntary. You've accepted voluntarily with no force. Mere consent comes with maybe you've been coerced or you've been intimidated. And when we look at the rape for men, usually comes in with mere consent. Like the previous speaker said, it comes in with mere consent. Either the man has been intimidated in place of work, something maybe to do with blackmail, mere consent. But a woman, in most cases, it is real forced. So rape does not happen in the same way for men and women, and that should really be examined. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dame Sora Mary, and I would like to thank our presenters for the day and for bringing up such an important topic. We see that over the years, the women have really tried to bring out the issue of rape, going deeper into marital rape and all that. And I feel like it has not really been addressed. I remember once making a comment by myself that how I wish men would go through certain things for them to actually to understand what women actually go through. Because for years and years, as the second presenter was telling us, women have been struggling to try and bring out these issues of rape, but to what extent has it been addressed? The first speaker was telling us, gave us a story about rape by like men being raped by people in higher positions or females in higher positions. And my question was like, is it not just taking us back to patriarchy? The second speaker was telling us that some of the reasons as to why men are raped is to try and dehumanize them or maybe make them lose dignity and all that. And we see that it's trying to make them powerless or less powerful. So if we are saying that women in higher positions are raping men, to what extent is this true? Because I feel like maybe they're just coming up because they feel like their power is being taken. Yes? You feel powerless. You're like, how can a woman do something like this? And so because you feel like a woman can't do something of this caliber to me, now you want to come up and be known. Whereas women have been struggling with this issue over the years. What have we done about it? When we talk of patriarchy, it's male domination. Other than that, we see that most of these traditional roles, traditional norms and stuff, we see that most of them have been dictated by men. Most of these things, we see that it is men at the center of all this, a lot of the things that we know. So we see that, of course, men are more powerful in one way or the other. And so they're just taking the issue of, like, they're bringing in the issue of male rape right now to try and not lose that power that, that they have held for a very long time. And the other thing, to try and defend the other side, I think the only valuable reason you can give or example you can give as male rape would be something like gang rape. By gang rape, what am I trying to say? This is a case that I do not know how often it happens, but I think it really doesn't happen as much. If for example, there is a case whereby a male is being forced to sleep with very many women. That's what I'm trying to mean by gang rape. In such a case, which is of course very rare, I think that would be called rape, right? Because having to sleep with very many people at the same time can be it can be forced, it can be coerced. And so there we can say that, okay, men are being raped. But this is to a very less extent because we have not seen such cases happen for a very long time. For the time I've lived, I think I've heard of it only once, and it came out as a joke. So I really don't understand. But thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, I know there are still so many hands that are up, but we are out of time. I'll just allow one more person to ask a question, and there's a gentleman down here. And then we'll give our panelists a chance to respond.
Thank you so much. My name is Interlude. I work with Center for Transformative Parenting and Child Health and Development Center, Mulako. And we implement a program called Parenting for Respectability. And in that program, it is a modularized program with 5 modules. But I want to focus on the 4th module, which is spousal relationship. And when you talk about spousal relationship, these are men and women in bed. Dr. Agaba has highlighted on the key issues that how patriarchy is maybe used by, how men use their power to coerce women into forced sex. Rape is simply forced sex. There are no discussions. But I will implement this program in the 4 countries, but I want to give testimonies of 3 testimonies from different countries. When I was in Nairobi last week, a man told this is a model for men only and women only. So But when you sit with men only, you will appreciate the fact that that men are actually raped. One man told me that when they were having sexual intercourse, and the man looked as if he was done. So now at the peak, the man lost energy. So when the man lost energy, now the woman brought in another style, which she wanted the man to respond to. Now the man told me that it was a war. Why? Because the man had lost energy. And you see some of these cases are causing domestic violence. Actually, the man told me that he left home for a week because of such occasions. Secondly, one testimony was taken from my dissertation. I'm also doing a master's in Busoga. One of the man told me that my studies on herbalists, how herbalists acquire the knowledge they use to heal people. Now, this man told me that the wife went to the neighbor, and the neighbor told the wife that your husband is complaining of you having low libido, that when you are having sex, you don't respond. Now, what the woman did is to go and get the herbs that can uplift her libido or lift her libido. Now, these herbs, when the woman used the herbs, but what the herbs brought was a tug of war. The woman would ask for sex every day, but the man would not. The motivation for sex was high by the woman, and now the man would not control. And what he decided was to abandon the home. Now, for purposes of time, I want to hint about power dynamics. There is a local woman in Nairobi, far in a village called Okolokocho, told me that actually men don't want to share power, but when they share that power balance, mainly benefits men, not us women. So that one I want to agree with you. However, we need to dig deeper. Who gives men this power? Okay? Who gives men this power? And who disempowers women? Those are the things that actually we needed also to position this discussion to. For example, the gender norms, the deeply, where I sit, we call them the deeply entrenched cultural norms. Entrenched cultural norms means that they cannot be questioned. And since we are talking about legal issues, I'm not from a legal background, but I know there are those local societal cultural laws that actually govern some of these marital issues. So as we get out of this room, we need also to be cognizant of this thing, or of someone, or of issues that gives men this power, and then we advocate or challenge those cultural societal norms. Because for us, we think actually when we are training men on spousal relationships, we tell them one of the things that you are supposed to do is to balance power. If you don't balance power, you will get issues in your marriage. And that's why key issues like rape, you see rape is personal until someone speaks out. So, for purposes of time, allow me end here, but by emphasizing, sir, you have done a very good research, but you need also to refocus some of your research to who gives men this power, because we have realized that the hegemonic masculinity she has been talking about has also caused men not to speak out on some of these key issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I risk being lynched. 2 people said they had their hands up for the entire 30 minutes. So they have only 1 minute each. And I'll snatch the mic if you use one of them.
Thank you so much for this. I've written down my questions, so it's very short and precise. To the okay, yes. To the panelists, is there a possibility that people's experiences and perceptions regarding the issue that we are talking about today is mispresented with the available legal words? Some meaning is lost and hence influencing the traditional public stereotypes we are talking about. Because if the description of people's experiences is really about a few limited words, for example, rape, sexual assault, domestic, the legal words, is there a possibility as Africans to find alternative words that are not foreign fetched? And I repeat my word, not foreign fetched, but kind of the people who have experienced these issues that we are talking about. Is there a way that we can find out alternative words to address the things that we are talking about? And I'm asking this question because of the examples that have been given by the panelists here of the man who was, whichever word, because I refuse to use those foreign words, because of the, first of all, the driver who was, whichever word, by his employee, and also employer, sorry, and also the married man who was, whichever word, by his wife. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists. My question is more, it's more open, just a thought from my thoughts. Due to feminism, can we attribute this topic that we're discussing to feminism? And where do we draw the line? By that I mean, women for a long time have been suppressed by men. Like men have, like the world had the power, right? And women didn't have the power. Feminism kind of uplifts the women to a certain level, close to the men. And because of that, we've gotten some power. And so in that, the marital example you gave of where a woman was demanding that I want to have a child, and you have to give me the child. It's feminism. I have the power to speak. I have the power to express myself, what I want in a marriage. Where do we draw the line? Is the act of waking in the night, in the wee hours of the night, having your man have sex with you without his consent, is it really fair? Can we, so for as feminism, can we find where we draw the line? Like, okay, we are empowered, but to what level? That's it.
Thank you so much for your questions and your comments. They were very insightful, and I'm sure that our panelists will do a good job of responding to them. This is another reminder yet again that if you haven't registered, please do register. There's a question that has come in from the people following online, and Mr. Bibian Muhanguzi wants to find out, in terms of evidence, can a doctor examine penetrative sex? That's what the question is. What are the recommendations on collecting and presenting evidence, especially by a doctor? I don't know who can answer this one. But yes, a reminder to please register. If you have not registered, just let us know, put up your hand, and then the forms will be coming around. We'll have Dr. Agaba respond to these questions first, and then Mr. Chelsea.
Very quickly, I'm good at being quick, especially when I'm standing, when I'm the only thing standing between people. and their lunch. The first question I got was the relationship between SGPV and homophobia. I think I was talking that in line with the Congo issue when I was talking about the fact that the raping of men by men is reducing them to an act that is usually attributed to the acts that are done on same sex. And by doing that, then you're making them, you're turning them into, you say you're turning them into women. Don't be shocked why people have a problem with homophobia because of that gender nuance of power dynamic of the man is now being turned into a woman. But there's also a very good example I always like to give about research we did in South Africa on corrective rape, where people were raping lesbians in order to correct their rape. And they were like, let's rape the lesbianism out of you. They would put bottles in them and expose them to very weird situations. So that is on SGPV. The other one was Moses, basically talking about equality and the law. And in my discussion, I talked about substantive and formal equality. Maybe he missed the first words I put in front of equality, because I did not say that equality before the law is not considered by the Constitution. I just talked about the nuances of that equality. And also, the law is not etched in stone. We are here talking about changing the law, revising the law, right? So if the law is unfair or doesn't apply to someone, then we should talk about changing it, revising it, and improving it. And then you almost told me in a bit of the way I agreed with you that men are being raped silently. That is how I started my discussion today. So we were agreeing with each other, essentially, Moses. And then someone asked the question of how role of women in perpetuating patriarchy. I always have an issue with that because we are giving women more work now. Yeah? You know that thing where they say when a child is raised badly, then it's the role of the mother, because the mother spends the most time with the child. Where is the man? Where is the husband here? Yeah? Let's stop turning men into children. Men are people with agency, and the role of patriarchy is something that has to be addressed by both men and women, but also women as gatekeepers of patriarchy. Women are the biggest gatekeepers of patriarchy. There's a program I was watching recently where the title was, She Stayed With Me When I Was Unemployed. And then somewhere there, the woman gives an account of where the man cheated on her, and she stayed. But the way she gives that account, she's talking about the fact that the man cheated on her, but she blamed herself for that man cheating. It's like, maybe I had not been present, I had not been doing, maybe, and the man is agreeing. So women were the biggest gatekeepers of patriarchy. We will be against women on women and the worst. We are the worst with each other. That is the truth of the matter. We work together to keep this thing, which is not only to men. I told you patriarchy. If you understand it, it's about power and how this power works and operates. Which brings me to the very last question: feminism, and how do we ensure that feminism doesn't go too far? Again, if you look at it from the power sense, power is always shifting. That is why you see the discussion is now where people are saying, have women become too powerful, right? Who was powerful before? The men. Now you're feeling that the women are becoming too powerful. So what do you do now? Now you also have to fight back. One of the things I don't want to leave here without saying, because it has been everywhere in the news, Akatalekeka, as you are saying, is the case of Hajat. Have you heard about the case of Hajat? So now the case of Hajat is a very good example of power and how power is shifting, and how you could say, the patriarchal establishment represented by men and women is now, you can see how that power is playing out, whereby you see that the men have come out and they're saying, we are going to support our man, Hajj, whoever it is. The women are also supporting Hajj, ironically. But what is very funny about that case, everyone has forgotten about the young girl at the center of this case. Everyone is now focused on character assassinating Hajat. Whether it is true or not, we've taken away from that point of the girl who is saying, I was raped, and letting the court do its work. So this case has become a case of the court of public opinion, where the woman has already been found guilty, even though she's not the one to whom rape was committed. But all that to say, the power is always shifting. When you feel like the power goes so much, then you fight it and pull it back. It's such a power play, and that is why it is at the center of looking at this discussion that we are having today. Those are my submissions. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your comments. The first one, there is a comment that was made on sexual harassment. When I gave my example of a driver and the employer. Actually, that one, you can't take it to be sexual harassment because there was sex that transpired, that both of them had. But the driver was not ready for that sex, but he reached somewhere. There's what they call freeze response to biological responses. Now, that driver was caught in between that response. So the issue is about consent. Was there full consent? So it wasn't there. That's why we can turn it to be rape. Now, someone talked about defilement. I think that is under section 116 of the Penal Code Act. That section caters for both girls and boys. But something funny, I'll give you my experience as a prosecutor. When it comes to reporting those cases, usually the parents of the girl will be very quick to report. Those ones of boys, they do not report. And that is as a result of the cultural beliefs which are deeply entrenched in society. But we are supposed to be charging both girls and boys who have been engaged into a sexual activity. We normally charge them in separate counts of defilement and defilement, both of them. It doesn't matter who approached the other first, but as long as both of them have had that sex between themselves, we charge both of them. Then there is a comment on that rape of a woman and a man are totally different. That both of them do not go through the same effect. I will refer you to this case of Lord Tanya of UK, where the judge rejected the prosecutor's plea for party. The judge reasoned that the same effect that the woman who has been raped goes through, it is the same for the man. The trauma that comes along with that rape, it is the same, whether you're a man or you are a woman, it doesn't matter. Then there was also a comment on the gang rape. In Uganda, we've not had this kind of scenario, but in my research, I indicated that gang rape cases are on an increase in Zimbabwe. They are there, but they have not yet reformed their law to cater for that, but they are being catered for under the Offences of Sexual Act. Then there is someone who asked that what role have men played in this fight as you conducted your research? Actually, what we may say is that it appears men were behind the drafting of these laws. At one point, they never thought that they would be victims of rape. Okay? But now, times have changed. They are victims. So meaning that much as they would want to come out to fight, because of the misconceptions that are within society, they are prevented to do that. And that's why my research advocates such campaigns. They will come out at one point. Then there is one was to that in terms of evidence, a doctor can examine penetrative sex. Now, I think this question, someone wanted to know how, as a prosecutor, how would the evidence in regard to sex would be corrected? One, in my research, I recommended that when you are a victim, make sure that you don't bathe. First, go and report. Don't clean yourself, because when you clean yourself, you are now removing the evidence. So it is better you first go and report, such that if there is maybe DNA that can be picked from your clothes or the perpetrator, it will be picked from there. And then we also consider medical doctors examining them. But although the medical forms are still too narrow, they are not so exhaustive to really include other things that should be done.
Thank you so much, our panelists, for the responses. I think that at this point I should just invite Dr. Musingi to come and close. Have our lunch. Final boarding call. Please register. Roll call will be at the line there. Jokes.
Thank you very much, Mary, for reminding them that indeed it's actually true. There's going to be actual, you need evidence of your signature. Anyway, thank you so much, colleagues, for your attendance and full participation in this important conversation. I'd like to thank our panelists, Councillor Ivan Chaze and Dr. Daphne Agaba, for delivering, as promised, an insightful, rich conversation that has given all of us, I'm sure, food for thought. I'm now the one standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to just speak very briefly for about 2 minutes. Number one, some people are asking where can they access the dissertation from. One of the things that we're doing as URIPEC is to try to have it, or some of it published as a working paper. That should be able to come out in about a month or two. Secondly, and here I speak from another hat, as the research and graduate training coordinator at the School of Law, Makerere University, to say that this is also partly a small test of the power and the depth and the rigor of Makerere University's graduate program. Makerere University says, and we are indeed a research-led university. At the School of Law, we are similarly a research-led School of Law, and what you have seen today is evidence of the depth of research being carried out at the graduate level at the School of Law. So we are quite proud of that as a school. Now, thirdly, I'm also, I think, thankful for the interdisciplinarity that was on display today, that we had a conversation across disciplines. Our colleague from the School of Law and also from the legal profession, Councillor Chaze, and also our colleague Daphne from the School of Women and Gender Studies, but also that was represented in the audience in terms of the organizations present from civil society, our colleagues from GIRAF, from UCAA, from UKPC, from FAMFORD, who left a bit earlier, and also from the broader feminist movement, from the School of Law, but also, and I'd like to thank you, especially the colleagues from the School of Women and Gender Studies who made it. I'm told it was a role somewhere there. Very welcome, and we hope this is not the last time that you join us here at the School of Law. Now, finally, I hope this is not the last time that you join us, right? Now, finally, a small bit on the substance. That a lot of what we have heard about, I think, really is a start of a thought process around what we assume around power, masculinity, vulnerability, etc. I'd like to also probe a little bit. Is it okay for a 50-year-old man to go out with a 20-year-old lady? No, yes. 50-year-old man, 20-year-old lady? No, yes. What about the opposite? 50-year-old woman with a 20-year-old man? So mixed reactions about the first one and broadly negative about the second one. But for us, and I think today we have been talking about one particular kind from the point of view of assault and trauma. But there's also the question as to what does love look like? And what are acceptable forms of love? And some of us can also have differences based on gender. Now, I think I'll leave it at that and invite you all most warmly for the sumptuous lunch that you have heard a lot about and are yet to see, but I can promise you it's right outside there. Thank you once again. Asanteni sana and karibu. Asante.